It's a season-ending edition of Bills by the Numbers, where we let the stats tell you where the Bills are at. We're presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Coming up, what were the top 3 strengths and shortcomings of the 2024 Bills? Where should we see areas of growth going forward, and where do they need some help? And we'll have our one burning question. We've got the NFL Combine in a month? It is the sport that never stops, and even though we're disappointed the season is over, we are happy to have you with us. Bills Wall of Famer Steve Tasker, Bills play-by-play man Chris Brown with you. And as we look back on the 2024 season and what we thought could happen, I know that Steve and myself were optimistic that the 2024 Bills could be an even better team than the 2023 edition, and that proved to be the case, both in overall record and playoff success. The Bills get back to the AFC title game for the first time in 5 years and take the two-time defending Super Bowl champs down to the wire. But what do you think you'll remember most about this 2024 edition of the Bills?
I will probably remember a lot like I do the 2017 Bills. Sean McDermott took over a drought team that hadn't been in the playoffs in 17 years. They made a couple of preseason trades and were accused that they were going to tank, and they got to the playoffs with that roster. This is a little bit like that. This was supposed to be a rebuilding year. No star players offensively outside of Josh. A lot of question marks. The offensive line had been shuffled slightly, lost a lot of name players, and not only did they get to the playoffs, but they got the AFC Championship. I think this once again, for whatever the detractors of Sean McDermott are, and there are many who think he's not the guy, think he's peaked. His game management leaves much to be desired. Let me say this. That guy, once again, has proven to maximize the talent that is on this roster and get more out of less than any other coach in the league.
Yeah, and we'll probably get into some of that a little bit later on here in this pod. But when you talk about elite, top-shelf talent, this team wasn't blessed with an abundance of it on their roster from top to bottom. The thing I'll remember most about this season is what this offense did to carry this football team this season. The best player on the team, Josh Allen, made an enormous sacrifice in personal statistics to do better for an offense that needed to be more balanced, and sacrificed all kinds of passing numbers in an effort to be a more balanced attack, and that happened. It also led to the emergence of James Cook as a premier back in this league. I think we all knew he had the physical skill set to do it, but to put up the production as well, I think is what stands out for me from this 2024 team. What would you consider, Steve, the top 3 strengths of Sean McDermott's squad this past season?
Well, certainly the offense was the difference, was a huge strength. I thought the turnover margin was a huge strength this season. After that, their ability to score points, probably. Not certainly their offense, that goes hand in hand with the offense, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I'll take that a step further. Bless you. I'll take that a step further and say the ability to score points with only 2 elite weapons, that being Allen and Cook.
Right.
To be second in the league and scoring 31 a game on people, you got to tip your hat to Joe Brady in that regard, because he realized, I don't have elite talent at the receiver position, maybe not even at the tight end position, and I'm going to make it work anyway. And he did it with a distribution-led attack that really just spread it all across the board. I can make this offense difficult to defend because they don't know where the ball is going, because we don't have defined alphas in this offense. That's how we're going to make it work. And the fact that he was able to, I thought was great. Second thing, offensive line. That's one of the greatest strengths of this team. I don't even think there's a question about that. They led the NFL in rushing touchdowns and in fewest sacks. Tip your hat to the O-line. They were fantastic from start to finish. And for the second year in a row, stayed remarkably healthy as a 5-man group. And then the last thing I would say in terms of a strength, ball security. Fewest turnovers in the league. I think they had 8 giveaways was the fewest since like the 1933 Rams or somebody.
Think about
this. It was
this.
ridiculous.
They lost 2 fumbles the entire year, and those were by Josh Allen in the first week or 2 of the season.
First month of the season, week 1 and 4, I want to say.
And those are the only 2 fumbles they lost. No receiver, tight end. Nobody
back.
lost a fumble all year. They might have fumbled. I can't even remember. But
they fumbled, but they got him back.
Nobody lost a fumble all year except for the 2 that Josh did first month of the season. It really is an incredible stat.
What do you believe on the other side might be the top 3 shortcomings of the 2024 squad?
Well, their pass rush was probably something that needed to be. They just don't have a premier pass rusher.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of solid players up front, a lot of guys that are real pros, play hard, play well, but they are not dominant up front. That's one. The other, to me, would probably be their inability to get off the field on third down. Their third down defense was non-existent at times, and it was really frustrating. So without their ability to get turnovers, they might have been historic in their yards given up. And the other one, maybe the run stop too. I mean, the run defense. You look back to where they struggled in the season, and it was when they just couldn't get off the field and couldn't stop the run.
Yeah.
And whenever that happens, whenever you're in a game, like particularly that Week 4 game is the one that'll be the hallmark of the weaknesses of this team. Their inability to get off the field and inability to adjust. Now, certainly they were injured in that game, and they didn't have their top guys, but they could not adjust hard enough to get off the field and stop the run and force the Ravens into doing. Even if they forced them and they got beat the other way in a passing game, they still couldn't force them to do that.
Knowing that I was probably going to have a lot of the same answers, I went and looked at some of the numbers. So third down defense, as we know, the Bills finished 29th in the league in third down defense this year, a 44% conversion rate. That was up 6% from last year when they gave up a 38% conversion rate and ranked 19th in the league. So not great last year, but poor this year. Pass defense as a whole, 28th in completion percentage allowed at 68.4%. That was up from 65.4% last year. So a 3% increase in completion percentage against. And look, that speaks to the pass rush as much as it does the coverage.
Oh, sure.
Because you're giving quarterbacks more time. That means guys on the back end have to cover longer. So that was a problem. And to your point, the pass rush. And look, I realize it's not just sacks. The Bills did a pretty good job of generating pressure. Sometimes even a knockdown rate was decent through stretches of the season. But at the end of the day, you look at this team, they were third in the league with 54 sacks in 2023. That dropped to 39 this season to rank 18th in the league. It was a precipitous drop, and not a tremendous change in player makeup, with the exception of Leonard Floyd, who had 10.5 sacks for this team a year ago. He was no longer part of the equation, and you look, and you've dropped, 15 sacks off of your total from last year. So, yes, he's a part of it, but not all of it. So that's got to be rectified.
And Leonard Floyd is a tremendous pass rusher. He's a high level pass rusher. Maybe he's not elite like a T.J. Watt or Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson or one of those guys, or the kid up in Detroit either. Maybe he's not one of those guys, but he is top shelf. And when you got a guy like that on your team, Greg Rousseau benefits.
Right.
Vaughn benefit. All these other guys benefit, and they get a sack here and there because of it, and all of a sudden you're 14 sacks light of where you were a year ago.
Yeah. What part of the team do you think has the greatest chance of improving in 2024, where just maybe the growth of players already on the roster need to happen? In other words, you got young people in the pipeline here that you think can go from being on the field to making a bigger impact in 2025.
I would certainly like to see Cole Bishop and Keon Coleman be more indispensable than they are. Bishop should be able to get on the field as a starter instead of through injury, but next year with an off season under his belt. Certainly Keon Coleman has a lot to work on, and he was was nicked up by injury, was fits and starts. Plus, the philosophy of the offense was such that they were spreading the football around, like you mentioned before. But also, a guy with his tools, by his very presence on the field, should demand the ball because he gets open, because he's an option, because he is consistent. And that's one of the things we didn't see from him. Certainly, he flashed in the Seattle game earlier this year and came through in a big way in some of these games. Why not every week? And that's a question he has to ask himself and come up with an answer. But those I look at the young guys in that question as to see the growth. That's where I'm at, is those two young guys coming in and being and fulfilling their potential.
Right, and I would probably add Ray Davis to that group as well. A guy that was playing a secondary role, and I think that will continue. But I want to see more consistent play from him when he is in the game. So there is no. I'm not going to say there was a drop off. They're two different players. Cook is very dynamic and elusive. Davis is more of a downhill, straight-ahead runner.
Yeah.
But I felt like there were instances last season where he looked unsure as to whether to just hit it up in there, which he is always more than eager to do, or whether he should bounce. I felt sometimes he was trying to mimic James Cook's vision, and he doesn't have the same elusiveness and speed as Cook. And I think he learned some hard lessons through the course of this season, and hopefully through film study and coaching from Kelly Skipper, the running backs coach. He'll encourage him, hey, man, you just be you.
Yeah.
You're good enough to be in this league just being you. Don't try to be James. Try to be Ray Davis. And I'm hoping that kind of clicks with him, and he's more of that down. We need to see the Ray Davis that showed up in Week 6 against the Jets on the opening drive. That's Ray Davis at his best.
Right.
Not bouncing it outside. So he's a guy. And then I'm really hoping to see a big second year from Dwayne Carter, because defensive tackle is going to be a need position, even with Ed Oliver and Dwayne Carter certainly on this roster. Everybody else is somewhat of a question mark. Is Daquan Jones too old to play another year? We don't know what the decision's going to be there, because he's 34 years old now. He's got another year on his contract, but what's the decision there? And then everybody else, for the most part, is a free agent at the defensive tackle position. This is a great draft for defensive tackle talent. So Dwayne Carter's got to be a piece of that new wave of players that are going to be in there getting significant snaps. And we saw some encouraging things from him. Then he has the wrist injury, has surgery, and then we don't see him again because he's inactive through the postseason as they elected to go with veteran players, which, I totally understand. But those are two other guys in addition, I think, to Coleman and Cole Bishop.
And on a less popular take, probably, I don't think Kincaid or Shakir. I don't think we should worry too much about them because of the philosophy of this offense. I mean, nobody was going to knock it out of the park with 100 catches this year. It's just the way it was going to be.
Yeah.
And Kincaid struggled with injuries, which doesn't seem to be a theme in his career. And I think Shakir is exactly what we thought he was going to be.
He was third in the league in yards after catch.
I think Shakir is exactly who he's going to be, and there are times when you think they should go to him more. As this offense evolves, maybe away from the everybody eats mentality and start to go to guys who are getting it done, maybe he'll get more opportunities. But Kincaid, despite what happened in this last game, I have full confidence in the fact that when he comes back and comes back healthy, we're going to see the guy we know that he is.
What part of the team do you believe is in the need of the biggest upgrades?
Probably the defensive overall team speed. The safeties with Rapp. Now Taylor Rapp was, he was out of the game at the end of the season, but DeMar has a hard time keeping up in coverage. Although they trust him, and which is a huge part of it.
But he's a free agent.
So there's no guarantee that he'll be back. Rasul Douglas he's a headsy, cerebral player who takes his chances and makes them happen.
Also a free agent.
And then you've got Benford, who will come back and he'll play well. He may be in line for an extension even with the season he put together. despite what happened at the end of the season with his concussion. Taron Johnson, you're going to have to start thinking pretty soon about Taron Johnson being vulnerable because of his age and athleticism. So it's the athleticism in the back end of the defense is one thing I think they need to address. And I mean, Kaiir Elam's probably not going to be around this next year.
I mean, he's got another year left on his contract, but does he make this roster? I think it depends on the upgrades that they make.
Exactly. So I think the defensive secondary is a place that we're going to see some turnover and maybe some elevated athleticism.
And I would argue that they also are going to need to add a veteran safety just because of Taylor Rapp is nicked up a lot just by virtue of the style of football that he plays. He's always throwing his body around in there, and he's going to miss 3, 4, 5 games every season just by the way in which he plays football. And so I think you need depth at that position. And obviously we don't know the future of DeMar being a free agent. So there are moving parts there. And I would say cornerback is a position they're going to have to address, perhaps in the draft and in free agency. Rasul Douglas is 31 years old. He is not a speed corner. And this team played a lot less zone coverage in the second half of the season. Matter of fact, in the playoffs, they were playing 40% man. So you're going to need a 5-tool cornerback on both sides on the outside. So I think that the description of the kind of cornerback you need is now different than what it was just a year ago. So more speed, to your point, absolutely. And I think you're going to need corners that can play whatever call you want to execute on the back end.
But I like Benford. Benford's going to be around. He's going to stick. He'll be fine. But they need some athletes back there to keep up and to force the hand of the offense just a little bit more than they were able to.
And then you need a proven elite pass rusher, which is easier said than done. But they've got to find one. And as I said earlier, help on the defensive interior. We shift now to the numbers game where Steve will be quizzed on 2024 season performance by the Bills. Question number 1. The Bills had the second highest number of takeaways this season with 32. Where do you think they ranked in total takeaways in 2023? Second in the league this year in terms of number of takeaways with 32.
I'll bet you they were between ranked 5th and 10th. Top 10.
They were better than that.
Really?
They were second last year with 31.
I underestimated.
Sean McDermott defenses pretty routinely are near the top 5 in takeaways almost every season.
I wasn't ridiculously off.
No, you were in the ballpark.
That's a miss.
Question number 2. So now knowing that the Bills finished with the second most takeaways in each of the past 2 years and have the highest 2-year total in the league, what do you believe is the percentage of opponent drives against the Bills that resulted in a turnover? Okay, so this is a team that has the most takeaways the last 2 years. I'm going to give you multiple choice, Steve, okay?
All right.
Is it A, 11%, B, 17%, C, 20%, or D, 24%? The percentage of opponent drives against the Bills that resulted in a turnover.
Let's say 17%.
And you would nail it, Steve. Absolutely. 17% of drives. It led the league.
That's big.
Over the last 2 years, the Bills led the league in opponent turnover rate. No other team in the NFL was better than 15%. The league average, 11%. So 6% above average. That's something. And it's really what bailed out this defense in many cases, and it's one of the biggest reasons why, despite all those deficiencies that they had, they still finish 11th in points against.
I've been thinking a lot. I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but this team may not be better than the one in 2023. It may not be better. They got a better record. They had better statistics offensively. They were different. I don't know if they're, and that's I keep telling people, they've been good enough to go to and win it for 4 years, now going on 4 years, for sure, 5 years, 2020 all the way through 2024. They've been good enough to go to and win the whole thing. But you got to play, listen, you got to play well on that day, right?
We've heard that before. All right, question 3. The Bills finished second in the league in points per game behind Detroit. Where did they rank in red zone touchdowns in 2024?
I will say number 1.
They are not number 1.
Oh. Thought I had it.
You want to try one more time?
2.
They were number 3, Steve. They were third with 48 red zone touchdowns. Detroit number 1 with 50. Baltimore number 2 with 49. It was a close race.
Yeah.
Finished third. Question number 4. What Bills defender led the team in tackles in the 2024 regular season?
Oh, gosh, I should have known. I'm going to get DeMar.
It was not DeMar Hamlin.
Benford. No, not Benford. Bernard.
Not Terrell Bernard.
Rapp?
Not Taylor Rapp.
I don't know.
It was Dorian Williams.
Oh, bless his heart.
Guy didn't even start 17 games because when Milano came back, he was starting. The guy still led the team in tackles. You want to talk about a guy that finds the ball, it's Dorian Williams. Bonus question, who led the team in tackles in the postseason?
I will say, who played in all 3 games? I don't even remember. Let's say Milano.
Matt Milano.
Oh,
17 tackles. Well done, Steve.
Thank you.
All right, so that is the numbers game. Bills fans, get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Just download the app today to play any way you want. Plus, with live betting, you'll get updated odds on games that have already started. Best of all, you get paid your winnings fast. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the Buffalo Bills. Time now for our one burning question. Steve, what would be your top priority this offseason to make the Bills even better than they were in 2024?
I think it's an off season where they've got to focus on the defensive side of the football. I don't know how specific you want to get. Certainly the pass rush, all the stuff we've talked about. They need depth in the secondary. They need a pass rush. They do need an elite pass rusher, something that changes the protection of the offense. They've got to find the guy, and I don't know that there's a guy on the roster that does that right now. It's all about the defense this offseason. They've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt what they can do with guys on offense. They got the offensive line. It stays intact. They've actually worked towards making it just as deep as it is this year. Their offensive line is going to be great. Their tight ends are intact. Their running back room, the whole thing is on the offensive side of the ball. The outside skill position guys, they've proven they can they can go with anybody. Defensively is where they've got to focus, and it starts up front.
I would agree. It's an elite pass rusher, and you need a proven one, not one in the draft. You have to trade for one, find someone in free agency that you think fits the bill. By hook or by crook, they need a premier edge rusher to line up on the opposite side of Greg Rousseau, and then presto changeo, Greg Rousseau could be a 10-sack guy as well if you have somebody of that caliber on the other side. And that, in turn, obviously helps the guys on the back end who don't have to cover as long because you got a guy putting heat on the quarterback. Our closing figure deals with the Buffalo defense's ability to force fumbles in 2024. The Bills led the league in opponent fumbles with 28, had the second most forced fumbles with 18, and had the most fumble recoveries with 16. On the flip side, the Bills had the second fewest fumbles, 11, and the fewest fumbles lost, as Steve mentioned earlier, just 2. That's amazing. It's amazing. That's it for this edition. Make sure you subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use so you know when our next episode is out. Because when you need to know about the Bills, you need to check Bills by the Numbers. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time, everybody.